This is episode 34 of the Gauntlet podcast. My name is Jason.
And I'm Rich.
And I'm Kristen.
And I'm Dan.
Hey, Kristen. Good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back. It's nice to be back on. Feels like home.
Yeah, we like having you on. Well, let's talk about the games we've been playing. It is a bunch. We're not going to be able to talk about all these games, but we'll do our best. Why don't we start with Urban Shadows? Kristen, I gather you've been playing Urban Shadows over on Fridays, I guess? Or
Yes. Yep. And we actually wrapped up. And I think my favorite thing about Urban Shadows, actually, in the whole span of the game, was when we kind of broke the rules and didn't do what we were supposed to be doing.
Okay, you better explain that.
Yeah. So, if you haven't listened to previous podcasts, one of the ways that Urban Shadows starts off every game is that every character has this sort of mission of their own thing that they're supposed to be doing and going off. And so the characters are almost always in different spaces. And it's fun and it's kind of, working the puzzle, but my favorite part of role-playing games is interacting with the other people at the table, waiting for, 15, 20 minutes, even though it's interesting to hear what they're saying, not interacting with other people while they weave their stories was kind of disappointing, even though it was entertaining. And so in the last game, we kind of all just fudged it and worked our way into each other's storylines, started showing up all over the place, and it was the best game that we had. I loved it. It was so much better. The other thing the other rule that we broke is that, you're supposed to have all of these debts and you're supposed to call in your debts and make people do things for you. And none of us ever did it because we were just like, would you do that for me? Yeah, I'll do that for you. Great. Nobody had to force anyone to do anything. And it was kind of, that part of the game didn't really work for us because we're all just such giving people.
I feel like there's a conversation there that can be had about Powered by the Apocalypse games with currencies, because sometimes I noticed this in Monster Hearts too. That has the strings and
I never use my strings,
but conditions as well. We just get so caught up in the role play because PBTA facilitates such good role play that we tend to forget about those little currencies.
Yep.
I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that. That's kind of been my experience with it, though.
That's the exact same thing I was thinking. In Monster Hearts, I never used my strings. We're taught pretty early on, not verbally taught, but it's sort of a social contract that as role players, we don't often force other people to do what we want them to. We find ways to work them into stories that are interesting or that they find comfortable or want to work with. And so having a game mechanic that's like, you're going to do it or else, just feels very strange to me. I can see where it might be good if you had a more combative PvP centric game group, but for us it always just felt kind of strange.
When I was part of the playtest group for Masks, there are some PvP-ish elements of the game because you affect how people perceive themselves, and a lot of times that just happens in the role play. And Brendan, who's developing the game, is trying to insert the mechanics in a lot, and it was interesting because he would try to use it because we're playing over Hangout, so he would be in the chat box like, "It sounds like you're doing this thing. Roll the dice. You're doing this thing." We're just playing the characters. So I hear you, Kristen. Although I found that when he forced us to engage the mechanics, it just naturalized us to try to flow that within what we were doing. It did feel weird, though. It took a little bit to get used to.
I've run so many of these games, and it really takes some practice to know how to recognize when moves are being triggered, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. Like, you have to, and I think like being really, really conscious of what especially the basic moves, what the basic moves are for the game, and just knowing when to when you hear it, and even if you notice it a little late, maybe you continue with your fiction a little bit, but then you kind of back up and say, hey, you know what? I think we triggered Sneak, or I think we triggered Bolt, or whatever, right? I'm thinking of the Warren because that's the one I played most recently. One of the things that I do with Monster Hearts especially is for the first 2 sessions, I remind about the conditions and the strings. I just constantly try to hit that. And something that I heard on another podcast, and I want to, it was probably Jankcast, but it might have been Walking Eye, and I'm not even sure who it was who had this idea. One of the lady hosts, she was doing a thing where for Monster Hearts, she gave out actual physical strings, little bracelet things to the players. I've always thought that's a great way of making people remember that this is a mechanic they can engage in, Those are my thoughts. I've always found the currencies really, really, they can be so satisfying when everyone's hitting it, but sometimes we just forget. you know?
Yeah, sometimes it feels intrusive, which I think is maybe Kristen's point, is it feels like, well, we're already doing this thing.
Oh, no, for sure, yeah.
In this slight tangent, I know we got a bunch of games to talk about, but just the physicality. When I run Lady Blackbird at games, I'll actually have poker chips out to represent the experience points, just to kind of remind people of when they're hitting their experience points. You know, I'll toss my chip in. Yeah, and it also helps me as a game master, because then I can kind of look around and see who's actually hitting their keys to get experience points and know where to push my scenes.
Yeah, that's smart.
Ooh,
that's
I like
smart.
that.
Is there anything else we want to say about Urban Shadows before we move on?
No, I think that's about it. We wrapped up, and I'm not sure if it's going to get put on the calendar for a while, but I do hope it comes back. We had some in and out issues that I think Russell talked about, with people not being there some weeks and other people that are there some weeks. I was actually surprised for a game that revolves around debts and these characters that you would think you'd really need a stable group of people. I was surprised how flexible it was with people coming in and out, because there was that level of disconnection between characters. We managed to slot new characters in really nicely. I was pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, cool. Good. Awesome. All right, well, the next game on the list is, gosh, it's got to be in the top 5 of best named games ever, or games with best titles. Renegade Jennies and Boilerplate Jacks. I love that. I don't even know what this is. Rich, enlighten me.
I'm curious.
Josh Roby is the guy who was behind Smallville. Hopefully you guys have played
Yes.
that or looked at that Cortex Plus. He's done a number of other games as well. He and I do this kind of vidcast type thing where we go through the Stars Show Black sales and talk about how it's just one big long Apocalypse World game. And I knew he had released in beta the Renegade Jennies and Boilerplate Jacks, which is steampunk role-playing in the world Atlantis broke. And I just have been fascinated with the game, but I just, I wasn't sure if I could figure it out. So I said, Josh, man, would you run this game for me? So I would love to run this game for you. So I'm like, I love that reaction, And it's a steampunk game. It's in an alternate America, alternate history kind of thing. America is really a misnomer, because there's the Confederate States and it's kind of in the 1800s type deal, and Atlantis has risen. You got some steampunk technology that has arisen because of Atlantis and some other things. It's an homage to Firefly and Blake Seven and other kind of ragtag band of ruffians. One of the things that I'm really fascinated by this game was the character creation. You start off by shopping.
Oh boy, I love that game.
Right? Yeah. Josh has like pages and pages of really cool images of cool steampunk gear, and you're supposed to actually pick out some stuff from the catalog, or if you want to go find your own stuff, that's totally cool. And surprise, surprise, one of the players is like, I've got this whole Pinterest board. I will pick from this Pinterest board. And then you stat it up, and I didn't have necessarily a character concept coming in, but just looking at the pictures and the costume items and other stuff, it immediately drew me into, this is cool. Then you cast an actor or find someone who looks like, it's very outside in. All the character creation, very outside in. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. For me, that's the kind of thing I really glom onto. Another aspect is that it's very world hopping. Like, you're going to be going all across the globe. That's part of the thing, is that you're going to be on an airship doing things. And so you have to create almost like a fate aspect that describes your character. But one of the things that is very important is your skin color. And I thought that was really a weird choice. And I actually had some kind of like, I don't know if I dig this. But I had Josh there, like, help me understand, why is this important? And he said,
yeah, it seems a little odd.
Right.
Yeah.
It does. And he said, well, because it's a very multicultural game, and you're going to be going to the far-flung corners of the planet where the color of your skin is part of a person's first impression, and it may or may not be a societal thing. It could be very well based on their tribal beliefs. It could just be how odd or different you are. And I thought, I really look forward to exploring that in play, because I think he's coming from a good place with that. Like,
yeah.
there was
yeah.
I'll tell you, we've done character creation. We have an awesome crew. and we have not started play. So I definitely want to talk about this more.
I was going to ask you about gameplay, but I guess
I know, right? But
we'll table that for next week. Yeah.
we will actually 2 weeks, a bi-weekly game. But I look forward to talking about it more. It's a great game so far.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it until I saw you put it on the notes. Actually, I think I saw you post about it on G+, like real briefly, but I think I didn't realize it was a game or something. I just saw those words and I was like, that's a cool title of something, and then I moved on.
It's new from the Steam sale. No.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
It's an actual RPG.
I love the idea that you're basically storyboarding your characters before you get started, that everybody has a look and an actor that you're thinking of and skin color and personality, and that all these things are sort of visually storyboarded before everything gets started. I did a couple of projects in my post-grad work with storyboards and text, and I found that those are some of my favorite things to do. Putting that in gaming would be just totally good fun.
Doing all these hangout games now that I've been doing for the last, 4 or 5 months or whatever, one of the things that I'm noticing as a part of like hangout gaming culture or whatever is to put a picture of your guy like in the sheet or whatever, like have a photo of them, like of like, some picture you found that looks like your guy to you. And it's surprisingly effective at creating the illusion, like it really is. We never did stuff like that face to face, It was always just kind of in our mind. I think it's not along the same lines of, this idea of like storyboarding your character, right? Cool. Was there anything else you want to say about, I'm going to get it wrong, Steampunk Jenny and Boiler Steampunk Jenny and Boiler Room Jack. Renegade Jennies and Boilerplate Jack. Yes.
It's nothing worth the time. However, I look forward to talking about it more as we continue to play.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to have to go look that one up when we're done. Dan, you've also played a game I'm not familiar with. It's a week for that. Tell me about Uncharted Worlds.
Speaking of games with awesome titles, right? Uncharted Worlds. It's a very evocative title.
It sure is.
Here's the thing. I don't think I'm going to say a whole lot about this week because I'm not sure what it's doing. I'm not sure what its goal is as a game. Like, just a high level thing. It's like a space opera apocalypse world hack, but I'm not feeling it right now. And I think part of that might be because I missed the first session where they did all of the world creation and made all the factions and all that. Apparently, character creation is you have like a bunch of different packages. You have like sort of life pathy things where like you'll have these 3 aspects of your character's past or something, and you like pick moves out of each sheet to combine into your character. But I don't know, man. Like, it seems super complicated. Everyone's character sheet was a stack of papers like 10 or 12 high.
Oh, I hate that.
Oh boy, yeah.
Yeah, like, I used a pre-made thing, which I guess was fine, so I just have like, just because I didn't want to spend 2 hours and hold up the game, so I was just like, alright, give me this pre-made character here, and I'll use him. But yeah, I don't know, it seems okay if you're really hard up for space opera, and you really love Apocalypse World, but I haven't found like the thing that I like about it yet. Maybe in like 2 weeks after we play again, I'll have a better idea.
I don't know anybody that's hard up for space opera.
I don't know. There's people who like space opera, right?
Yes, I'm one of those people.
It's a thing.
Right, yeah.
I'd like to get your guys' take on this. I have noticed a few of the newer PBTA games that are kind of out there. Not some of the more well-known ones, but I've seen them out there, and there seems to be like this sort of trend. I don't know if it's a trend, but I'm noticing that games are coming out where you assemble your playbook, like from a variety of like packages and components.
Right.
Spirit of 77 is a game that I backed on Kickstarter that does that. I don't love that about it. I'm curious because to my mind, the playbook is such an integral part of this sort of like traditional Apocalypse World kind of mode of play, right? The whole point is you get this like archetypical character that's easy to grab and go.
Right. And it's set up to be a character who makes sense in the world. And so like the playbook selection gives you an idea of the type of stories that the system's trying to tell. And so when you have like this weird grab bag and you can make like anything come out the other side, it's much harder to tell like what you're actually supposed to be doing with your characters and where they snap into place with each other and all of that. Like, it feels like we have a lot of redundancy on our team and all of that just because like people happen to pick classes that don't necessarily mesh with each other, right? Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like I haven't found an identity for this game yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll, you got more sessions, I assume.
Yeah, I think we have one more. We were supposed to do it next week, but holidays, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll be curious to see how it shakes out in the end. I mean, at the outset, though, yeah, the sort of like assemble your character, assemble your playbook from all these different parts. That's just not a thing I like. It's not a thing that
and
I'm into.
Especially combined with the fact that there is no setting really. You're creating all of the factions, you're creating all of the politics that like the relationships between the factions and all that on the first session. There's really nothing, it doesn't give you a whole lot going into it to tell you what it's supposed to be.
Do you think that maybe that this style of assembling your playbook is an attempt to grab some old school gamers that
you bet. Yeah,
that they're trying to like swing back from the super simplistic characters to something that, you know, goes towards the people who love nitpicking every little bit of things?
That might be some of it. I don't think it's possible to say with any definitive, you know, give a definitive answer on that. I think that might be some of it. I think also, you know, there are some people who look at Apocalypse World games from, say, a more traditional role-playing game standpoint, and all they see is, well, gosh, I can't really customize my character, can I?
Right.
Yep,
There are no customization options. And I think the lack of, like, of real detailed character customization options has always been a thing that has held some people at arm's length when it comes to these games, you know? We've talked about this 100 times in the podcast, though, so I don't feel the need to belabor it now, but it doesn't fit to me. Like, it just doesn't seem like the right move.
Oh, one thing I will say that I really enjoyed about it was, you know, you can circle your look or whatever on your play sheet. And so every past, I think, comes with its own look. On my pre-made guy, it's like, pick something from each line. It turns out that 2 of my pasts ended up with the same look. So I am manicured, and grizzled.
Wow. That's pretty good. You're extra manicured. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
so I'm picturing myself as like the most interesting man in the world, right? That's my character.
Yeah.
Except he's in battle armor.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, I guess we can go ahead and move on to the next game then. Dungeon World. Oh boy, we've played so much Dungeon World. Between myself and Kristen and Rich, that is 3 different games of Dungeon World. I'm just going to say mine real quick.
So I'm just going to go away for like 20 minutes. Sound good?
Yeah. Just come back and join us when we're done, Dan. Mine real fast. I just did a one-off dungeon on Thursday because we wrapped up our Funnel World campaign a session early. And we're kind of in between, like new things. And so on the calendar. So I just did a little one-off dungeon. It was pretty standard. I got to play with a new player though, so that was fun. I always enjoy meeting new people, and Hangouts has been really awesome for that. The group, I mean, honestly, like it was a one-off dungeon. It's not super connected to like anything else we're going to be doing on Thursday night, but, I don't know, it seemed like everybody was having fun kind of stretching the Dungeon World legs a little bit. Kristen, tell us about your Dungeon World game.
Again, you know, it's Dungeon World, and we've talked about it so much, but I'm playing in Daniel's, not Dan, but Daniel's Dungeon World game on Wednesdays, and I've apparently caused several issues because my first character, I'll say first because I've been killed off, my first character was a very logical character, and apparently this causes problems in gameplay. My character choice made it very difficult for our GM because I didn't behave in predictable ways. And if anybody saw Gauntlet notes from last week or the week before, Daniel mentioned something about somebody randomly groping a priest, and I didn't grope that man.
Yeah. I saw that, yeah.
I won't go into details because I know Dan hates things about stories. It's been fun challenging the way the story goes because of a character that's very, very logical and just doesn't take anything for granted. But the interesting thing I will note about last week's game is that for the first time ever, I was killed not because of me. I've never had a character killed off because somebody else failed at something.
Huh.
So how'd this go? I have to hear about this. How'd this go?
Short version, we're fighting a big baddie, and I take a massive hit, and I'm down to 3 or 4 hit points, and another character decides that he's going to heal me. Didn't ask him to heal me, but he decides that he's going to heal me, and he does poorly at it, and so he killed me. I died.
Great.
It was the most, I was shocked. It was the most bizarre situation. I was like, I have never died because of somebody else before. I didn't even know you were allowed to do that. So that's my Dungeon World story of the week
I guess it's not,
first.
I mean, like, one of the things that it's in the GM moves, and you can turn a move back on someone, and that can mean you get hurt from something like that. It's definitely a bit, like, I could see why that came off odd, but yeah.
To be fair, I had been rolling spectacularly poorly. So I guess I deserved it.
Yeah.
But Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, I saw Daniel's post about like I don't think he was complaining. He was just kind of talking about how like you guys are definitely zigging when he expected you to zag, right?
Yep.
So that's okay. That's what players are for. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Rich, what about your Dungeon World game?
Well, my Dungeon World game, I'm putting it in to get a little bit of credit. I'm actually the production assistant monkey for the Dr. Tom the Frog show.
Oh, that's right. This was a Dr. Tom Dungeon World game.
Yeah,
Yes.
Dr. Tom the Frog went on as a guest player for 1 week, and then he was the DM for an ongoing Dungeon World game called Chain World. And I was pretty excited because these folks have played, this was their 16th and 17th game sessions, which is pretty long for Dungeon World.
That's a pretty good long Dungeon World campaign.
And some of them cosplay. So I helped Dr. Tom the Frog create a cosplay for his fighter.
Dan and our eyebrows just like shot up a good 2 inches.
These are his pauldrons. This is just for you guys on the video feed. These were the pauldrons. You know, they kind of fit behind. He's
Really good. Yeah. Okay.
Here's his chest plate. You see it's got a tongue on there as part of the breastplate there. So he looked pretty snazzy. And I helped him when he ran the game, which just happened. It was a Freaky Friday edition. And I know that Dan edits out plot, but I'm editing this one. The short version is that the player characters all swap bodies because they had ticked off an Illithid. Because they had agreed to get a tome from the library for the Illithid. And they asked him finally when they went to confront him at the end, why didn't you get it yourself? He said, well, they don't give library cards to mind flayers.
Wow.
So I'm going to claim ignorance here. I have no idea who Dr. Tom the Frog is.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Kristen.
I know.
Dr. Tom the Frog does a very short, like 7 to 10 minute YouTube show where he interviews people. He interviewed Sean Gomes, who created Uncharted Worlds, and other people, and occasionally he'll do guest spots to play or run games. He ran Ghost Lines last year. It was pretty awesome.
Okay, cool. I'll have to look him up.
You should look him up. Yeah. I've seen a
He's
few.
pretty
Dr.
funny.
Toms.
He's a very punny guy. He's a good little frog.
I watched the Dr. Tom episode with Tom McGrenery just because I wanted to see if he was as handsome in motion as he is in photos. So
Is he?
I was correct.
Oh, very
So,
good.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Let's go on to the next thing. Boy, what do we got here? Oh, In a Wicked Age. That's a thing you've been doing, right? You guys have been doing this In a Wicked Age campaign for a while, right?
No, this is a brand new one, actually.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Well, we've talked about this a bunch. I mean,
Yep.
anything you want to add to the conversation here about In a Wicked Age?
So I put it on the list, actually, not in particular about the game itself, but to make a note. There are several of us in the Gauntlet, and I think in the Gauntlet Houston, and then I know that there are more in our Gauntlet online community, but couples who game together. And so I put this one on the list, actually, because I've noticed, whether for good or for bad, that my husband Scott is the one who's running In a Wicked Age, and I challenge him on things that I would never challenge you, Jason, or Dan, or Russ, or anybody else who's running a game. I just kind of like, if I didn't like something, I'd just be like, grumble in my head and kind of keep it to myself. But when Scott does it, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And I chime in with, with like, oh, you don't, we could do it this way. And I don't know if that's probably a bad thing, but it's just kind of an
I think it's probably
observation.
a bad thing that you don't speak up with the rest of us. That's what I would say.
Oh, I just considered it polite.
Oh, I mean, are we talking about legit criticism here,
Yeah.
or is it just
No, yeah.
like, are you just trolling at the table? What's going on?
No. I wouldn't do that to him. But, things like, as the DM, his NPCs would like, he made one that I felt was kind of treading on my storyline a little bit more than I would have liked. So I kind of called him on it, and I probably wouldn't have done that if it was anybody else. And so we actually had a conversation about it all the way home. I was like, it's one of those funny, like, married gamer or couple gamer people thing. And I was just wondering, Dan, I know you've played with your wife, but you don't really play the kind of games that we usually play. If this is a thing anybody else has noticed, do you call people on stuff more often, when you're in a relationship with them, or do you treat them as you treat other people?
I don't role play with my significant other. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I played Murderous Ghosts with April, and I just killed the shit out of her. So
I was about to say, you just play games where you write on her, right?
That's right.
that too, yeah.
But would you have killed anybody else in the same way that you killed her?
I don't know. I like to think it was a little extra special.
There you go.
Yeah.
When my wife and I first met and were dating, I quickly found out she was interested in this vampire thing, and that's how I got into Vampire the Masquerade. And very quickly, she just figured out all my tells, and I would not share any notes with her, but there would be points where she would just look at the group and go, the Nosferatu's the one who did it. I'm like,
oh. Awesome. Okay, well, In a Wicked Age, we've talked about this game so much. Listeners should go find another episode where we really deep dive on it. It's a really, really great game. Kind of a swords and sorcery thing by Vincent Baker that has a really interesting sort of like negotiation mechanic that helps drive the fiction. Pretty sweet game. Is there anything else you want to say about it, Kristen?
No, that's it.
Okay, cool. Rich, you got a bunch of stuff on your list, like Star Wars stuff and Dresden stuff. You want to kind of run through, we've talked about some of that before. You want to kind of run through some of that pretty quickly here?
You bet. Star Wars is continuing on. I had another session scheduled this Sunday that I had to cancel it to work on a science fair project with my 10-year-old. But it's fun. We finished up our Star Wars Edge of the Empire. I can't get enough Star Wars. Remember that thing where we were talking about the space opera? That's me.
You are the guy.
I'm that guy. But we finished it up, so I got to put my awesome Twi'lek bounty hunter to rest. She was successful and awesome. Dresden accelerated. The playtest period has ended, but we have one more session left because we want to finish the story.
Oh, that's good. Is that a good
nice.
sign, or is that that's a good sign, right?
It's a good sign. It's good. Okay, good. Lowell's fantastic. He knows how to make Fate sing. I got to figure out what he's doing. It's awesome.
I maintain that I think Fate requires like a Fate savvy GM. So.
He is a Fate savvy GM. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that wrapped up well for you. I want to save the play-by-post stuff for the very end of this segment, I think.
Oh my, that's the headliner?
That's the headliner, yeah. So let's go to Lasers and Feelings. Dan, that was us. You want to set up Lasers and Feelings?
Yeah, sure. So Lasers and Feelings is a one-page game by John Harper, and it is essentially like old Star Trek. And your character has a stat that is their laser/feeling stats. It's high if it's lasers and low if it's feelings. And when you're rolling lasers, you're trying to roll under your number. And when you're rolling feelings, you're trying to roll over your number. And that's basically it. And lasers is anything like cold, calculated things or dealing with science, and feelings are like rash actions and dealing with emotions and all of that. And so that's it.
Yeah, it's great. It's, we played, a session, you know, it's kind of a, I don't know if Gonzo is the right word, but it's definitely got like a more camp sci-fi aesthetic, you know, like kind of a 1940s, 1950s vibe. Even maybe, I mean, I think it's directly be inspired by Star Trek, so maybe even like, you know, like 60s or whatever. But in any event, kind of like more of a throwback sci-fi vibe to it. I thought our game got a little funny in terms of like, we're playing it pretty humorous.
Yeah.
You know, it was fun. But yeah, it was a good time. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I liked it. It's something that works really well over Hangouts too, because it's super simple.
True. Yeah.
You have your one number and you roll dice, and that's all easily done in Hangout. Yeah, I liked it.
For sure. Yeah, it's great. And it's free. And it's a single page. We could probably read the entire rule set right now on the podcast, and that would have been faster than what we just did. So.
Should we do that, Rich?
Do it.
Rich, should we do that?
It won't make the final edit, but sure.
It's a nice, big, easy cut, right, Rich?
Yeah, from here to here.
Awesome. Lasers and Feelings. Go check that out, listeners. It's pretty good. We've played one of the hacks by our friend Ray Otis, Sorcerers and Sellswords. Remember, Kristen? That was pretty good too.
I do remember. I liked that game.
Yeah, that was a good one. Awesome. Well, that just leaves Apocalypse World, but this is play by post-apocalypse world. And I'm a part of that, but Rich, you're running it. Why don't you give us just like kind of like a overview of kind of what it hasn't really the gameplay hasn't really started yet. Like it kind of just barely started.
Yeah.
But kind of tell us about like the setup, like the process and stuff.
The setup was, first I wanted to create a how-to because I wanted this to be new user-friendly, because I wanted to pitch it to the Gauntlet community. And there's some people who are really experienced with play-by-post and some newbies, so that's pretty exciting. Some people mix of experience with Apocalypse World. We're using the 2nd edition battle preview, which comes from anyone who backs the Patreon that Vincent Baker has. I'm going to say it that way forever and ever and ever. So I did a little how-to thing where I stole some screen caps of a game that my friend Jen ran from me in Google Docs, and then I pitched it out to everybody with a cool little video from a dead mall, because my inspiration was a game that I'd run before. I found from Jason that you can just recycle stuff over and over and over, because every time he runs a game for me, he's like, I ran this before for like 16 other people.
It's true, yeah. It's so true. I just read the same shit over and over again. But my Dungeon World thing coming up, I can't do that anymore because they have to all be like standalone experiences. So I will break that habit. But
yeah, people are going to get suspicious when there's like 5 copies of every item in the little hangout.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Like, oh, we had one of those too. Like, sorry, I'm actually talking about that more later. So I'll put a pin in that for now.
Yeah, pitched it out is set in a mall, and I pitched out the idea with a cool, like, dead malls, because I don't know if you guys have ever seen the YouTube videos of people going into giant cavernous shopping malls that are no longer in business, and it's amazingly, like, this is murderous ghosts, man. This is spooky, crazy stuff.
This is creepy stuff, yeah. The video is real creepy. It was good, though. It set the tone, though, I thought.
Yeah, and so we've gone through character creation, we've gone through some world, like, because all I wanted was a mall, and I really wanted to leave it up to everybody, like, you guys tell me, why doesn't you stay in this mall? Because you're staying in the mall for at least a little bit, because I just dropped like $12 on this PDF of this awesome mall. It's a really, really amazing mall with like 60-some pages worth of like draft stuff and architectural breakdowns. It's so cool. And Vincent says make maps like crazy, and I just bought one.
You just bought them. Just buy them. Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I do. I just
made
go from the internet. I'm loving it so far. We've only had like one scene so far as of the day of this recording. I'm really digging it though. I haven't been as like chatty on our shared hangout like everybody else, mostly because I'm just busy with other things. But I'm paying attention to it, and I'm really digging it because, for one thing, everyone just seems so excited about it, and I'm really like loving the excitement that the group clearly has to get going on it. But also, I think you're doing a really good job as far as like communicating things to people. Like, I think this is the sort of thing where a communication breakdown would be, I think it could be made much more difficult if you weren't like communicating so clearly and consistently with the group, and all the documents you've made and stuff. It's all made it a much more manageable experience. And that's something, because that's the biggest thing I was worried about, because I've never done a play-by-post before. For me, it was like, gosh, I just don't know what this is going to be like. I don't know if I'm going to be able to like manage it. But you're doing a terrific job so far, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. So.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Yeah, I've seen a lot of games die on the vine, but due to lack of communication, it's really hard when everybody just goes to this one forum like once a day, and you only have so much time. So having the Google Hangout text chat, to me, is just like the lifeblood of a really healthy...
I think having the Google Doc for all of the like fiction, and then the Hangout, the chat Hangout for like all of the sort of mechanical housekeeping type stuff, I think it's a really smart move, because people won't have to look at all that other stuff. They'll just see the story. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I keep saying, like, people get super excited in the chat, and I'm like, I love this, guys. If it does not go in the Google Docs, I will not remember it 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
I cannot wait until this recording's over so I could go post back. That's a good sign.
It's a sign of a good game.
I started reading some people's responses to the first scene. I'm really enjoying it so far.
How many people do you have?
We have 7 player characters.
Wow.
Yeah, but I have a co-GM MC, my buddy Paul, and we've got like a little draft doc where we work up the posts together. So it's really fun.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, let's go to the next segment. Our next segment is Giving Me Life. I don't want to go in any particular order here, so we're just going to go in the order of the notes. Kristen, what's giving you life?
That's me. Okay, so I always cheat. I always have more than one giving me life, and I'm not going to break tradition. I'm going to cheat again.
You do always cheat on this. That's true.
I know. So the first one's just short and squishy, which is, as of yesterday, Sunday, Scott and I have been married for 1 whole year, so that's giving me life. It was our 1-year anniversary.
Yay. I'm so happy about this because the gauntlet brought you together. You owe your marriage to us.
That's true, yeah.
It's not true.
We've decided that, yeah.
It is true, yes. You owe your marriage to myself and to Rob.
You can tell the public that, but it's not true. But the thing that's actually giving me life is actually much more lame than that. And that's nostalgia food. And what I mean by that is food that I ate when I was probably in elementary school and that I have not had since. And for some reason, this fall semester, I've just been really wanting nostalgia food. So for Halloween, I made Halloween themed dirt cups. Do you remember dirt cups from when you were a kid?
No.
I don't know what that is.
Oh my goodness,
no.
Is this like a Texas thing maybe? Dirt cups, short version. You make chocolate pudding and you mix in Cool Whip so it's fluffy like chocolate mousse. And then you layer it in cups with crushed Oreos and you bury gummy worms in it so that it looks like dirt, like a little mud pie.
That sounds all right.
I see what they did there.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I tucked little Milano cookies in halfway down so it looked like a little tombstone with worms and things hanging out, right? And I know that nobody else at Halloween was as interested in these as I was, but I was damn determined to have dirt cups because I wanted them. They reminded me of my childhood. And then, for some reason, this Thanksgiving, I'm going to be making Watergate salad. Is this another one that nobody's heard of?
No, I know what that is. Yeah.
Oh,
My grandmother made that.
Yeah,
right. So
all the time.
It's a super old lady dessert.
Yes, it is.
It really is. My aunt made it for me once. I think it's also an somewhat East Coasty thing. It's pistachio pudding, which I do not like pistachios. It doesn't taste like pistachio pudding, though. It's pistachio pudding, and again, you mix in Cool Whip. All of these have Cool Whip. I think Cool Whip might be running my brain. But, and then you mix in crushed pineapple and pecans and mini marshmallows, makes this, like, fluffy dessert thing. And so I'm making it for Thanksgiving, and again, nobody wants it but me. But I'm bringing it because for some reason I'm on this like nostalgia food crusade. God knows what I'm going to do for Christmas, but I'm looking forward to it. It'll probably involve Cool Whip.
What about Krampus? What are you bringing in Krampusnacht?
I don't know yet. I haven't decided. I won't bring anything weird. I'll bring something yummy. So
Just
if you want to bring some like
tons of Cool Whip.
some like, you know, from the 1960s, some like molded salmon gelatin thing.
Oh God, those are so gross.
Great.
That's what's giving me life.
Rich, what's giving you life?
What's giving me life is that I've been training the Halhigden Half Marathon Novice 2 training to get ready for a half marathon that will happen Thanksgiving morning.
I love a literal giving me life. Those are my favorite.
It's so much healthier than Cool Whip.
Like it's literally giving me life. It's good.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's been wonderful. I'm in my taper week, so I get to kind of take it easy. And then after I run that half marathon, I'll probably eat Thanksgiving food because it's the holiday, and I will have all my calories so I can eat guilt-free. And then the next morning, when everyone else is freaking out about Black Friday, I'm driving to Disney World and taking my family. We're just going to go. Hopefully there will be no one there because they're all at Black Friday. And I will go to Star Tours, and I will love it.
Cool. Oh, yeah. Keeping with our theme here, right?
Exactly. I'm going to beat that one horse to death.
Man, Rich and I, we're not doing like a Thanksgiving dinner thing because we're not going to be with our families. So we're just having.
You should do mini Thanksgiving.
Well, we're actually gonna go do like a Times Square Thanksgiving. We're gonna go like spend a couple days in the city.
That'll be nice.
But it's not like, but we're not gonna have the whole like sit down and eat turkey and all that stuff. So, you know, it'll be fun to do New York City, but it's also gonna be kind of like, you know, this is.
You gotta make new traditions. Right? You gotta make new traditions. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dan, I guess you're next. What's giving you life?
For me, hey, stop me if you've heard this before, but I'm super into VR right now.
No.
I have heard this is a thing, yes.
A couple days ago, the first actual consumer piece of VR came out, and it is the Gear VR. It's for, if you have like a current generation Samsung phone, it's like a little holder and it has its own sensors, and you slide the phone into it, and then like, boom, VR. So, it's super cool. It's only like, it's like $100.
Oh.
And so I already had the phone because I'm a weirdo. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get this phone specifically because I know this thing is coming out. So I had the phone already, but, I don't know. It's awesome. So it's, I've not a whole lot to say about it that I haven't already said about VR in general, except, the other night I was sitting in a theater on the moon next to a man who was embodied as a floating cowboy head. I was a floating flower, and we were watching music videos on the moon, and it was rad.
Awesome. All right, cool.
All right, have you gone and done the D&D and VR thing yet?
No, I haven't done that yet. So, I don't quite have the right gear for it, really. So my headset that works on the computer is kind of shit because it's the first generation one. And so you can't really read things with it very well. And then the Gear VR doesn't really work in it either. So I haven't done that yet. I'm kind of planning on it at some point though. Cause it sounds really cool.
I'm going to wait for the, like, well, I don't have an Android phone or a Samsung phone, so I kind of have to, but I'm going to wait on the first, like, big VR consumer thing, you know, like the Oculus or the Vive or whatever, or the Vive. I prefer Vive.
Vive.
I'm glad VR is happening. It's one of those weird things where from a distance, you're just like, well, okay. But then like you put it on for like 20 seconds and you're convinced. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. Like I totally get it. This is the future. So
10 years from now, we look back and we say, this is what killed tabletop role-playing games.
No, this is what gave it new life.
We'll see. Okay, well, so giving me life. The thing giving me life this week is the Company of the Three Kings. That is the name of our Dungeon World adventuring company. I've kind of talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but not too much. So I'll just kind of say what it is. All of the Dungeon World games that I'm going to be running on Hangouts, and I think I've got a couple of other GMs who are going to get involved at some point next year as well. Basically, all of the players will be part of this thing called the Company of the Three Kings. There are several shared Google documents among the entire company that consist of a map of like their guild hall, an inventory sheet of things that like the players have acquired and they can put into the common group inventory, as well as a description of the guild hall and some of the different things and services and interactions that are available for the players, and a book where players can go and like take note of their triumphs and stuff. It's very, very nascent. We've just barely kind of started going on it. That little one-off Dungeon World thing I did, I kind of counted that as part of it. And I think it's going to be really great. It's one of those things that I can envision how it's going to go. And that's all that matters right now. Like it's this thing that's like, I know how it's going to go and I know what it's going to be like. And everyone is just going to have to trust me on this and get on board with it, because it's going to be awesome. And you're going to wish that you're not going to want to have missed out on it, basically. That's all I can say about that. The thing I'm really excited about, though, is some of the players from the last Dungeon World game, they started putting in, like, some of their characters, like, they gave their character a title, like a cool, like, fantasy kind of sounding title, and kind of said some of the cool things they've been doing, that they did in that little adventure. And I'm really loving, like, the tone of what they've written. Like, it's very, like, it's very humorous. It's got, like, a little bit of, like, wry, like, humor to it, which I'm really digging. Like, I kind of like the tone that's kind of been set on this, in the company book. So that's pretty cool. I'm liking how that's going. And it's going to require, I think it's going to be the kind of thing that it's going to require like a lot of prodding on my part to get people to like do their contributions, until it gets really like kind of self-sustaining and going. But, that's coming. So yeah, the Company of the Three Kings. Oh, another thing I'm really excited about it is, or the thing that's about it that is exciting me is there's a part of it where there's a document that has like a description of the guild hall that the company operates out of. And at the start of every adventure, there are different things in the guild hall that the characters can participate in or do or interact with. And they don't have to, but it's optional. But the plan is that this will be kind of a living thing, so that as adventures are completed and as things are found or reincorporated into the overall story, that the guild hall will change as well. And so, I kind of dig that. It's got kind of a video game quality to it, I guess, in some ways, of like, building up your base or whatever, but it's filled with hope and possibility. And that's something that that drives me. Hope and possibility are my fuel. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
That reminds me of is in A Wicked Age, one of the what is it? A specialty is what it's called. One of the things that you can take is that you have a specialty that nobody else can ever have again.
Right.
Do you know do you remember what the name is for that?
Oh, it's your little move or whatever, and it's called like, I think it's just called unique.
Unique, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, but nobody ever takes it because nobody ever knows what the previous people have done. And so nobody takes it because nobody will ever know what your guy did. And so nobody will try and repeat it. But if you had a book where you were recording all these unique specialties that only one man could ever do, that would really kind of inspire you to take that trait more often, because you knew it was going to be kept somewhere that other people could see it. That would make that trait much better.
I'm glad you say that, because that's kind of what I have in mind. Like, the funny thing is like this Dungeon World Adventuring Company idea for me, it's kind of like a tension between two things I'm really into right now. On the one hand, I'm really into this idea of like role-playing games having an ephemeral quality. Like, if you aren't there for the session, then you just didn't get to see what happened. Like, it was just a special thing for the people who were there, and that story's gone, right? Mm-hmm. But this is a way of preserving it a little bit, it's kind of like a way of like, it's still, the stories are still basically ephemeral, but this is just a little tiny way of like, almost like scrapbooking the experience. There's this other thing I'm really into right now, like I mentioned last week, which is the idea of games that leave behind artifacts, right? And so, Rich's Apocalypse World thing is going to be the ultimate expression of that, right? I think in its way, the Dungeon World Adventuring Company will have a little bit of that as well. So, like, here's this thing that we did, my hope is that like 2 years from now, people look back on this and say, oh man, like I was there when we first did Bleakwood House or whatever, or that's one of the adventures. So anyway.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it too, Jason. I think it's a great idea. I do think that it's going to kind of, you can't reuse the same plots now because we'll have a trophy to prove you already did it.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know it because that's going to be the hardest thing, honestly, because I've only got 5 original ideas when it comes to Dungeon World, and I'm gonna have to come up with 5 more at least.
There's just gonna be a room with like the 3 wicked kings, just gonna like 5 copies of their heads on the wall.
Exactly right. Exactly. I know. It's gonna be
5 copies of the 3 kings. I love that.
Right.
Yeah. It's gonna be like every Return of the 3 Wicked Kings. Right. 3 Wicked Kings Part 3: The Reckoning. It's gonna be stuff like
well, you could just start every adventure and like, oh, you're walking around the hideout, and the heads are gone off the wall. What's happening?
Oh shit! You better go find the 3 Wicked Kings again. Oh, speaking of 3 Wicked Kings, Dirk Leichty did up a little thing of my dungeon starter for 3 Wicked Kings. It's got art and everything. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
you can
that was
go on
super
the website.
cool.
Yeah, you can go on the G Plus community and download that for free. Awesome. Benefits of membership. All right, let's go to the next segment. So for our topic today, we wanted to discuss a lot of role-playing games have you playing behind the character's eyes. This is a phrase I actually had never heard until Rich and I were discussing the topic. But the idea, if I'm characterizing it correctly here, is that you play your character and you think what your character would think, and you behave in the way that you want your character to behave, and you're just reacting to what the GM kind of puts in front of you, right? Like the GM describes things and tells you things, and then you just react, right?
Right.
That is a style of play. That's a very traditional style of play. It's the style of play that's probably dominated the hobby for decades, right? There are more games coming out, more increasingly, even in more traditional, avenues of the hobby, where the narrative authority is split a little bit between players and GMs, right? We've talked about that before. And now you have games where you're not only just responsible for what your character is, how your character's behaving, but also you're responsible for filling in some of the fictional details, like you might be asked questions about background or the setting or kind of what's going on screen. You might have to actually describe the results of things that your characters do, which is, traditionally been kind of a GM function. So we wanted to talk about like tips for helping people who might have a hard time with that style of gaming, with that more shared narrative experience, kind of tips for helping them kind of navigate it and get more accustomed to it. Because I think all 4 of us, we've done both sides of the coin, right? And so I think we have something to say here. But before we begin, I think it would be really great if we had just a little more context for how to kind of understand this conversation. And Rich, I know you have kind of a personal story regarding your wife and your experiences playing games with her, right?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, after my wife and I started dating, we quickly tried role-playing games because that was a thing she did in high school, and I thought that was cool for us to continue it. And we played, D&D, and as I said, White Wolf, and a lot of the more conventional, the popular games. The ones that are still more popular than what we do.
Yeah, they're still far more popular than Fiasco. If
Vastly
you believe that,
more
right?
popular.
Yeah.
So this is what your normal role player does. They play behind the character's eyes. That's a phrase I stole from Cloud Brewer, by the way. It really explained it well to me. And, I started getting into more of the story games and shared narration. And as I started asking her to partake in them and take on kind of the GM duties, share that narration, she shied away from it. And it was interesting because I kind of went on this journey of trying a lot of new games that she wasn't interested in. And I asked her about that. We played games like Primetime Adventures, Apocalypse World, Don't Rest Your Head, Inspectors, Lacuna Part 1. And she didn't really enjoy them nearly as much as White Wolf. I think part of it had to do with that she didn't have fangs. And her character wasn't like immensely powerful.
There were no velvet capes involved. I know that's a
that was definitely a detriment. But I asked her, what is it about these games that you don't dig so much? And we talked about it. I even talked recently in preparation for this because we'd had the conversation before, and we kind of, okay, that's cool. Occasionally I'll try some games that I'll ask you to play, but we'll go back and play the more conventional style games too. And she came up with like 4 different areas where she felt like taking on that narrative authority and not just being a player, as she called it, was less comfortable for her. Do you want me to kind of list them out?
Let's go through all 4, or maybe we can we could talk about those 4 areas, but then like have responses as we go. Maybe?
That sounds fine. Yeah.
All right, let's do that. Well, so what's the first thing she said?
First thing off the top of her head, lack of cohesion. When everybody can take the story whatever direction they want, there's no overarching game master directing things, the story loses cohesion. It starts to fray at the edges, and there's nobody holding the line to say, no, this is the way that it's headed, or this is the true thing. This is true about the world, because everybody has a chance to change the world.
So the lack of cohesion, the idea that there's a GM who has like ultimate authority over how the world and the setting should go, and they're there to veto like anything that kind of like goes outside the lines of that a little bit.
Right.
And okay, I see that. That's a common criticism of story games, right? I mean, that's a very common criticism of story games. It's not a criticism that I personally like care too much about, because it's just like, I'm not super interested in like this, like that the story be like, something that has passed through an editor and like makes a lot of sense, but I can kind of see why that could be kind of an issue. I have a particular thought about that, but before I start talking though, I would see if Dan and Kristen have anything to say about it.
I think almost all of us have been in a game that we were enjoying until somebody took it off the rails. And so that's definitely her criticism. I feel like most of us would say we've had those moments where we completely agree that if there had been somebody, one mainline voice, or even if it's the game where you start off saying, here are the things that do exist and here are the things that don't exist, some kind of regulation, because I've had a couple of stories that I was really enjoying until somebody kind of,
someone
went
a weird direction with it. Yeah. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's where the rules need to support you in that case. And so, like, if you can't just, like, drop people into a game with no GM and expect it to work. But, I mean, that's why the rules are important, and that's why they're there to, like, enforce this particular type of story that we're telling and, like, keep us on track. Yeah, I mean, I think a well-designed game can avoid that. And also, just, like, don't be afraid to say, hey, can we do that differently? If somebody takes the game in a direction that you don't like. So, I mean, I think that, like, it kind of democratizes the power that the GM would have to veto stuff. And it's kind of up to everybody to pick it up and say, hey, look, I don't really like that. Let's do it differently.
Yeah, I'd be curious, Rich, if your wife had a chance to play something like Archipelago 3, where that's a story game, and it's definitely a shared, collaborative narrative experience, where there are like rituals and procedures in place in the rules, kind of touching on what Dan said, in the rules that help like enforce like telling a very coherent story, right? A story that kind of makes sense from A to B. Like there's no outliers in the fiction. I'd be curious to see how she would feel about that. Like it's almost like a group GM dynamic,
Yeah, Questlandia has some similar aspects. I think it borrowed pretty heavily from Archipelago 3, and we'll try that with her if we actually have a chance to sit down with a full group. I really feel that would work better at a table. I'm not sure how Archipelago.
I think it's probably more of a face-to-face thing. Yeah, for sure. I can't. I'm not seeing how Archipelago works great online, but I could be wrong about that though. I'm being very surprised by the efficiency of Hangouts games lately. So I hold that could be the case. Okay, cool. Well, what was the second thing that she brought up?
Mysteries. This is this girl who has mainlined all of the Midsummer Murders, all like 17 seasons. And mysteries are less fun for her when she helps to create the solution to the clues. Like, okay, it's this guy because I just earlier laid the seed for it to be this guy.
Right. Well, I mean, I think this one just comes down to personal preference. I mean, Dan and I have talked about this a lot. This was episode 0 of the podcast, in fact.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is kind of a personal preference thing, but, I would repeat, like, the thing that I always say in this is that, as a GM, like, the story you're telling is probably not that great. And so if I want a really tight mystery, I can get it from so many other sources that, like,
I can go read a book.
Yeah. It's, mysteries just are not satisfying at the table to me at all.
Yeah.
Especially, like, I want something that is going to be different because my character is there. If you could, like, take my character out and everything goes the exact same way, I'm not interested because I could get the same experience in half the time in a movie or something that actually has, like, editing and pacing and is like made to deliver a satisfying mystery, which I just don't think.
Yeah, I think like before I played a game like Society of Dreamers or before I played Run, I think I might have had some of the same feeling. I kind of don't know how I feel about a game where I'm responsible, where I helped make the clues and, solved them. I think I would have a tough time with that. I've grown to love them though. But again, this is just a personal preference thing. Like for me, those games like Society of Dreamers, like Cyrun, where you're telling kind of an emergent mystery that's developed, or Lovecraft-esque, it's developing as a collaborative effort. That's an experience that I enjoy. The mystery we're doing might not even be that good. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. Like Dan said, it's not going to be Agatha Christie, right?
Right.
But the experience of surprising each other, at the table, the experience of feeling like, particularly in Society of Dreamers, of feeling like you are, as a group, you're actually like the Society of Dreamers trying to solve this problem of what the Nemesites are. That experience is really, really, I really quite love it. So I think that one's just kind of a personal preference thing. I can kind of see how that might never be satisfying, honestly. So,
but I think you need to look at it more of like, you're getting enjoyment out of like, look at it more like writing a mystery than reading a mystery.
Oh yeah.
And so like framing it like that, like, don't go into it to try and get like the reward of receiving an interesting mystery. Go into it to like, hey, I'm going to cleverly figure out this mystery and like create a mystery. So yeah, it's definitely a different thing. Maybe it is just something that some people like and some people don't.
Okay, cool. Well, let's keep going. What was the third thing that she said?
The third problem she had with these shared narration games is my wife prefers to focus on one character's experience, and pulling out of that and describing things outside of that mindset makes it difficult for her to kind of jump back in. Like, she really just wants to drop in and emote and embody that character. And he's like, well, how does this other stuff outside of the skin of your character, how does that go? It breaks her immersion for her.
She's a method actor.
Right, the Daniel Day-Lewis of role-playing games.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the main crux of our conversation. So let's hold on to that one for a second, because I think that's going to be the main issue that people are going to have, right? Like, of this jumping in and out of from behind the character's eyes is kind of the problem that we've identified here, the principal problem. And what was the last thing then? The fourth thing?
Generally, the story games that I helped her, that I exposed her to, she felt the light mechanics were a little hand-wavy. She preferred games where she really understood what can her character do in a concrete way, what can they not do. More simulation, even if it were a simulation that wasn't exactly mathematically based, but just to kind of know this is what my character does, and the shared narration kind of leeches away a little bit of that.
Yeah, she's right. I think she's 100% correct.
Hey, if these were easy, she'd be playing story games. I may not even do a podcast with you guys. We'd be playing all the time.
She's 100% correct. This is like, man, we could talk about that fourth one probably for 3 episodes of the podcast, right? This is the divide in role-playing games right now, right? Between indie and traditional gamers, right? I want an experience that is more simulationist in nature. We've been having this argument for 15 years, right? 20 years or whatever, however long, 16 years. I want a statted out character. I want to know exactly what I can do. No. I want to be able to do anything I want, but I want this loose framework of rules that's going to lead to a great outcome. That is the constant argument, right? And it's probably not worth we will get really in the weeds if we go down that path. I want to go back to the third one. This jumping back and forth between like staying behind your character's eyes and then, but then having to jump behind, from behind there to do, more narration, more outside character narration type responsibilities. Solutions group. How do you get people to get accustomed to this style of play? Who wants to go first?
I think if you can think about it in shifts, if in some way, at least for the beginning bit, the taking turns with narration that you have, you're on. And when you're on, you are your character. You don't have to worry about anything else. But then there's some sort of actual break in the story, whether it's like a pause for a restroom break or get up to get a drink of water or there's a signal at the table where everybody sort of sits back in their chairs. But that there's some kind of break, and then you are now in it is your shift to be narrator. You set your character sheet aside, literally, move it over from the table, and you take on a new position, and you're only in that position for a certain amount of time, but while you're doing it, your character is not in front of you. Your character is, that's not your role anymore. But that when that role as narrator is done, you get to take back your character mantle and be that again. And I think that at least in the beginning, that can be very helpful so that you don't feel like you're constantly popping in and out, that you have your one moment where you're going to do this narration thing, but that for the rest of the time you can be your character. And then as you get more comfortable, you may find that you can transition a little bit more easily.
Yeah. I think that will depend a lot on the game that you're playing, for
definitely.
sure. I can definitely see the case for giving people a warning right before a little break about like what's about to happen or what you're about to ask. I do that all the time, right? When I'm getting up to go to the restroom so I can think about what I want to do next, I will often like tell a player like, hey, when I get back, I'm going to ask you about this if you want to go ahead and think about that, right? Or I'll signal that like as I'm kind of doing my opening questions in a session, I'll say, hey, I'm really interested to hear about what your character thinks is in this dungeon. Like, I want to know like I'm really interested to know like, why this is such a personal thing for your character. I'm going to come back to you on that in a second, right? Then they can start thinking about it, right? So I think there's something to be said for that, just as a, like kind of, especially like helping characters kind of or players rather get accustomed to that style of play. I do it a lot because I play games with lots of different people and often people who are brand new to this style of gaming. It's one of those things where you experience it, you experience like, you can see it in their faces. Like you can see in their faces like, oh man, I'm being asked a thing that I've never been asked before by the GM. And I'm not, it takes them a second, right? Like we played Lasers and Feelings the other day and we had a guy who said he'd never really tried games like this, but he wanted to give it a shot. And he did great. He did awesome. But there was definitely like a little bit of like initial like ramping up there, and I think I was trying to do my best to kind of signal to him like kind of what sorts of things might be coming up, so he could start thinking about it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that.
Kristen, I agree with you for the game that passes things around. It reminds me of Remember Tomorrow. I think that's a definite strength for that there's a very definite cue. Like I'm playing my my held character right now. And now I'm playing a faction and I'm effectively doing GM stuff.
Right.
That's a good game. We don't talk about Remember Tomorrow enough.
You should. It's really awesome.
We should play that again.
Yeah, we should. Yeah,
you could totally play that
blast from the past for us. Let's do it. All right, well, Rich, what do you think are the best ways to go about this? Like, how do you transition people from one style of play to this other style of play?
One of the little tips that I like is as a GM when I want people to have some narrative authority is coax them in with simple questions like, well, what does that look like? Right? Because that's out of their character's eyes, but it's within the periphery of what makes their character cool to them. I love the question asking in Apocalypse World too, because you can stay in character when you're describing your character's room, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I would even add, I add on to that statement, what does this look like? I always say, what does it look like on screen? I always add in that word on screen. And it's just a habit now, but I started doing it because I was reading somewhere, I don't know, years ago, it was some advice where it's like, hey, if you get your players to think about the game as a movie or a TV show, that's like the fastest way to get them to kind of like get into that, because they can start, really, I think it's great I think you should always think about your game cinematically, right? And I think adding the word on screen is super helpful, but I totally feel you on that. Yeah, for sure. Like that's a great tip. I would piggyback on yours there and just say, I think questions are really great. And I think for a newer player or a player who's maybe not accustomed to being asked these probing, questions from the GM, I think it's best to start with a very specific question. The more specific the question, maybe even kind of a leading question, you're going to get a really good solid answer, and it's going to build their confidence in this style of play, right? Because, let me give you an example here. It's very different to ask the player, if you say, okay, tell me about what happened between you and Bailey last summer, right? It's pretty broad. I would probably reframe it, what did Bailey do to you last summer that pissed you off? Or even better, last summer you had to kick Bailey out of your house. What did he do? You drill down a little bit, and it just makes it easier for the players it makes it easier for the player to kind of to answer, basically. They don't feel so on the spot. And I think specific questions are a great tool.
Well, and another thing that's doing is that's on every step you're bringing it closer to like why it's important to their character. That's another thing of like, maybe don't ask something like, well, what's something interesting about this NPC that you notice? Say like, why don't you trust this NPC? Like, what makes you not trust this NPC, or like something along those lines. So it's still coming like through their eyes, but it is describing the world, and it's making things true about the world, but through their own character's vision.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, that's terrific. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we're really honing in on some good stuff here. Any other tips, Rich? You got any other thoughts on this?
Well, let me circle back to the questions, because that's a great tip, but getting to that specificity is a little tough. Some examples have helped me. There is actually, I'll try to find it on the Story Games forum. When Monster Hearts was early out, there was an entire thread where people said classroom questions, because that's all that is just pointed questions that will give you a bit of a cue to answer off of. I also think that some of the questions for character creation all throughout Dread, like down at the bottom of the book, there are some really cool questions there that you can steal and use and reuse, because coming up with those when you've never done it before as a game master can be a challenge. Like, it took me a while to get better at it.
Yeah, no, I probably take for granted the fact that it took me a while to get used to it too. But it's one of those like fun skills to have. It's like a really great GMing skill, because this is tangential to the conversation, but I'll tell you what, the best way to run tons and tons of games, especially games that you're GMing, is to put the responsibility on the players for creating the story. And questions are the number one way to do that, right? Like, you just ask the question, and then you just stay nimble and flexible, and you run with it, right? That's kind of it's a nice thing for the GM toolbox. Yeah. And I remember I read all those dread questions. That was one of my first story games, and I remember those on the bottom of the little page, like all the different little things. I think I still use them, in fact. So, like, they're super helpful. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Those pointed questions, in a way, are like boxed text, because boxed text, right? That is where the GM was to tell their little bit of the story, right? And usually people ignore box text because it's long and it's purple prose.
Right.
But if you ask a pointed question, you're inserting a little bit of setting, just setting up, or you could be hinting if you get good at it, right? You can insert a hint towards something forward, even if you don't know what it is, because the answer could set it up. But you get to kind of, this is a little bit of my setting idea, it's a little bit of the background, it's really short, it's punchy, and also, like you said, it puts it on the players. Really powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Kristen, I know you wanted to talk about, like, modeling behavior. What were your thoughts on that?
These are two things that really apply more if you're asking people to take the helm for periods of time. So not necessarily asking questions about setting or getting them to chime in regarding tone or sequence or things like that. But if you're asking them to really take the helm for a moment or two, these are two suggestions for that. One of which is, especially if it's a multi-session game and you know it's coming up, instead of just telling people, hey, next time will you run the game, or hey, next time will you take a scene, give them the materials to look at. Let them see exactly what you as the GM got to see when you were setting up. Because for a lot of people who don't, I've run games before, but I've never run a game for the Gauntlet. Running a game for somebody who it's their game, that's very intimidating. It's very intimidating to take charge of a scene when the person who bought the game, read the entire book, and knows exactly how it's supposed to go is sitting there watching you like, hey, entertain me and do it well. So let them see what you get to see. I think that's a really good hint.
That's a particularly salient point for In a Wicked Age, which I know you've been playing, right?
Yeah.
Because the GM rotates in that.
Exactly.
Right? Like every after the third session, it changes every session.
Yep.
And I remember when I was switching it over last time I ran that, or last time I kicked it off, and I think I switched over to Scott, if I'm not mistaken. That was something we did. We kind of real briefly went over some of the materials, like there's no setting material in A Wicked Age, but I kind of made a point of like kind of just pointing out certain little things about the text. I think that's kind of in the same spirit, right?
Exactly. And then secondly is that as a GM, you want to model both the speaking and thought processes that you want your players to recreate. So as a GM, you're having an inner dialogue the entire time as you're making decisions, as you're choosing how you want to portray people and set your scenery and how you want to sort of problem solve what's happening. And while you don't want to talk that through the entire time because your players are going to get sick of hearing you kind of monologue about your choices, you do want to do it in sort of snippets or bits and pieces if you're expecting people to take over because it helps them know how to think about things, how to approach the story so that it's cohesive. Again, approaching that first topic that was brought up, so that you have a cohesive story when you switch narrators, that things aren't completely different, and so that they feel just a lot more comfortable that they're doing a good job of it, because nobody wants to take charge of a game and feel like they were the sucky one. You know, nobody wants to ruin it.
There's something to be said about modeling behavior in general. I mean, you know, for a lot of these games, they're going to be GM-less, right? Yeah. And so there isn't one person. There's a facilitator, right? But there's not like one person who kind of like who's, you know, necessarily guiding things. Although in like Apocalypse World games there is, right? But a lot of them are going to be GM-less. When I have a mixed group of people who maybe aren't so accustomed to more player-driven narrative, I always go to my like dependable players, the ones who are there, who I know can model the behavior, like, and model the style of play well. Dan is usually that person if Dan's in the game. Like, if Dan's there, I'll toss it over to Dan. You know, like, I'll make sure he gets the first round of questions, or I'll make sure he's the one who kind of kicks the scene off or whatever, right? When we played Cheat Your Own Adventure, that was a group of us we've all played together for ages, but I specifically chose Dan to kick off on that one particular thing of Cheat Your Own Adventure, because there was like there was a narrative experience that I think he and I knew we were on the same wavelength with, and he was going to be the best one to like let take off with it, right? To get everybody else in the same headspace on it. So there's something to be said for your ringers, so to speak, right? You have your person in the group who's going to help model that behavior and show like how it goes. Lasers and Feelings the other day, I made sure that Dan and David got the first questions, right? I made sure they got the first crack at helping fill in the fiction. So, I think there's something to be said for that. And as a GM, you can always, or the facilitator, you always should be doing that anyway. I think that's just like number one. That's like you're abdicating responsibilities if you don't model the style of play of the game, right? So those are some thoughts. Well, what else do we want to say about this, guys? I mean, do we have any other thinking here?
Well, one game was actually two games, but one that was a hack of the other by the same author, and he released them under different. Anyway, John Wick attempted a stab at this with originally Houses of the Blooded, and then he created a samurai fiction version of it called Blood and Honor. And in it, the contests are for narration. Who says what ends up as the result of this conflict? And I like phrasing that narration as the thing that is the contest, because more competitive players, they're going to have their idea of what they want to do, and putting it to dice, can be really helpful.
Yeah, I can see that. I think there's something to be said for, well, it kind of goes back to what Dan said, right? Like, when the mechanics like help you do the job, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. I think fan mail mechanics are great at it too, personally. I love that little thing that Golden Sky Stories does. I think it does a really good job of like enforcing the style of play, So one thing I wanted to touch on before we leave this is kind of going back to like your wife's like disappointment with some of these games, kind of bouncing off that a little bit. I think there's something to be said for the way you frame the experience for players. I think that's a big, big part of it. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean. When I run the Final Girl for a mixed group, and often for a group of people who are not role players, I don't even mention the words role-playing game. Like, those words don't even come out of my mouth. Like, I sell it like a party game. I sell it like a little party game that we're all going to do, right? And for whatever reason, I don't know. I mean, I don't have any proof of this, but I feel like if I said it's a role-playing game, like Dungeons and Dragons, I think I'd get a different response from people, you know? For Society of Dreamers, I frame Society of Dreamers always as like a group exploration of what the Nemesites are. I really, really de-emphasize like our individual characters in that when I'm kind of framing that game for people. But I definitely think there's something to be said for just like framing and reframing the experience in a way that's so that people's expectations aren't going to be deflated or whatever. Well, are we good on this topic? Is there anything else we want to say?
My wife loves inspectors.
That's good. That's awesome.
Of all of them, she'll play that one.
Yeah, yes. I feel like spousal relationships and relationships between players has been kind of a theme this episode. We should do something on that, right? Like, get your spouse to play role-playing games, because I have a non-gaming partner. Dan, yours is basically a non-gaming partner. There's got to be ways to do it. I don't know what they are.
Rich, it's funny you mentioned Houses of the Blooded. When I met Scott, I think it was maybe the first or probably second conversation we had. It was online, and he was like, "What are you up to this week?" And I said, "Oh, I'm with this game group, and we're going to be playing a new game called Houses of the Blooded." And he was like, and he told me later that he was slightly concerned that he was getting in with a girl who, like, some cult girl, like, what is this House of Blood thing she's doing? And then, of course, if anybody, like, if you remember Len, it was Len's game. So we went and we, like, the book itself was hundreds of pages, and I read the entire damn thing. And we went to his house and made characters and never played the game. It never happened.
Yeah, I saw when he posted that and was like, ha! This is a game that's meant to be played over years.
Len was Proto Gauntlet. I'm taking credit for your relationship with Scott. So once again.
But he was intrigued.
Bring it back around.
He was intrigued.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's our podcast, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to get in touch with us or continue the conversation with us, you should definitely go to Google Plus and join our Google Plus community. Just search for The Gauntlet. We also have an online community where we play games, or a community where we play online games called Gauntlet Hangouts. You can find us the same way by going to G Plus and searching for Gauntlet Hangouts. We are also on Twitter at Gauntlet RPG. Kristen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Dan, Rich, thanks so much as always.
Yep.
Thank you.
Everybody, you guys have a great week.
You too, and happy Thanksgiving.
What was it? It's Patreon.
Patreon.
I thought it was
You can't print
Patreon. Patreon?
What did you say, Kristen?
Patreon.
I don't think it's it's definitely not Patreon.
I'm pretty sure that one sounds better. It's like Atreyu from Neverending Story, but it's Patreon. I like it better.
Patreon.
Exactly. It's great.
Don't give in to the sadness, Patreon. Yeah.
Yes.
That is such a stinger.
Stinger done.